Hi everyone. Today I will be focusing on the various aspects of translation studies which I think will be benefit for you all. The first thing in translation studies which you need to know is the definition of translation. Translation is the communication of the meaning of a source language text by means of an equivalent target language text. So in case of a translation, we need a source language text, a source text from which the works will be translated, and the text into which the source text will be translated is called the target text or the target language text. Now, what is source language and target language? Source language is the language being translated from. So the language of the source text is called the source language, while the target language, which is also called the receptor language, is the language being translated to. So the text into which the work will be translated, it is called the target text, and the language of the text is called target language. For example, we have read the various versions of Shakespeare's work. The main, of course, is written in English, and when it is translated into Bengali version or Hindi version or like those in other versions, then those texts are the translated text, while the English texts are the source text here. Now, translation of a legal text requires not only fluency in the target language but also familiarity with the terminology specific to the legal field in the target language. So this is the criteria that a translator who will be translating the source text into the target text, he needs to be fluent in the target language. And he also needs to be familiar with the terms related to the target language. So he needs to be expertised in both the source language as well as the target language. Now, another thing which is related to translation studies is dynamic equivalence and formal equivalence, the terms which were coined by Eugene Nida. What is dynamic equivalence? It means sense for sense translation. That is, translating the meaning of phrases or whole sentences with readability in mind. In this case, the very essence of the source text remains intact in the target text when we read it. And formal equivalence, it means word for word translation. That is, translating the meanings of words and phrases in a more literal way, keeping literal fidelity. That means it is just a word-to-word translation or translating just like in the form of a paraphrase. So paraphrasing or word-to-word translation is the formal equivalence, while translating the content, keeping its sense intact, is the dynamic equivalence. So naturally, this dynamic equivalence is much more acceptable, and it maintains the essence. It keeps the essence of the translated text intact. Now, the main thing. Let's come to it. What is translation studies? Translation studies is the systematic study of the theory, description, and application of translation, interpreting, and localization. So the entire process of translation and the theories related to it, the description, how it takes place, application of translation, interpretations, and localization, all this comprises of translation studies. The term translation studies is coined by James S. Holmes in his paper, The Name and Nature of Translation Studies. Now, what are the types of translation? Roman Jakobson, in the year 1959, in his article on linguistic aspects of translation, mentioned 3 types of translations which are very important. The first one is intralingual translation, then interlingual translation and intersemiotic translation. We will discuss it, of course, in details. What is intralingual translation? It means rewording, that is, translation within the same language, including rewording and paraphrasing. An interpretation of verbal signs by means of other signs in the same language. So it is almost rewording and paraphrasing, that is translating a work within the same language. Suppose English to English translations. Interlingual translation means translation proper. This is what we generally understand by the term translating from one language to another. An interpretation of verbal signs by means of verbal signs in another language. That means translating, suppose, from English to Bengali, from Sanskrit to English, or from Bengali to English, from English to Hindi, okay, and vice versa. What is intersemiotic translation? It means transmutation, that is translation from one sign system to another. For example, playing music from notation, that is an interpretation of verbal signs by means of signs of non-verbal sign systems. So verbal signs means the speech, the language which we speak, and non-verbal means which involves facial expressions, body language, gestures and all. So in intersemiotic translation, the translation occurs from one sign system to another, that is either from verbal signs to non-verbal or vice versa. For example, playing music from notations. When we play in a piano or harmonium or guitar, we usually follow the notations. So the notations are the verbal signs which are translated into non-verbal. That is when we play the music that produces from our musical instruments are the non-verbal signs, and they are the translated form of the verbal notations. So these three are the main types of translation. Thank you for listening to me, and we will continue in our next session the rest of the aspects of translation studies. So thank you.